continent of Australia doesn't have any really large mountain ranges. There is a series of hills over on the east coast that provide some relief, topographic relief. But really, this island continent is surrounded by lots of water, the Pacific Ocean to the east, the Southern Ocean to the south, and then the Indian Ocean to the west. Across the top we have the Timor Sea and the Arafura Sea, and the Gulf of Carpentaria up at the top end. We have some major ocean currents. In fact, one of the most rapid ocean currents on the planet is the East Australia Current, or EAC. It flows south to north, separating the Coral Sea to the north from the Tasman Sea to the south, both part of the Pacific Ocean. And then on the west coast, a very unusual south-flowing current, and that's called the Lewin Current. Most places in the world, the west coast have cool water currents flowing towards the poles. In Australia case, the Lewin Current. And then a weak southern Australian current going from west to east across the bottom of Australia. So those are the major ocean currents. In terms of the winds, down in the Southern Ocean, there are these prevailing westerlies. These are very fast-moving winds, particularly in the latitudes of the 40s and 50s. Call them the Roaring 40s and the Furious 50s. Across Australia itself, some westerly winds, but not as dramatic as the Southern Ocean. We have southeast trade winds that occur seasonally, in the summer in particular, and large cyclones, cyclones that are formed in the that rotate in a clockwise direction, impinge the coast. Hurricane Yazzie, for example, in 2011 hit Queensland, and then cyclones on the west coast as well, traveling to impinging the coast along there. Now, the other important aspect of the climate in Australia is the southern the El Nino Southern Oscillation on the east coast, and that's an interannual variability which causes drought and flooding. Now, looking across the continent for the river basins, what we see are a couple of one really large river basin, which is the Murray-Darling Basin, which takes up a lot of the southeast corner of Australia. This Murray-Darling river system is the most extensive by a long stretch, because the second and third largest just north here are the Fitzroy and the Burdekin, and they're really small by comparison. So the rest of the continent is made up of a series of very small coastal catchments that flow to the sea, and these coastal catchments are pretty ephemeral, dry up in many cases, depending on whether it's the monsoonal or the this is the Tropic of Capricorn, and what we see is to the north we have very much a monsoonal rains that occur. So these are monsoons, which are summer rains, versus to the south we have winter rains, Mediterranean climate. But what happens here in the center of Australia is a large desert. So we have a big evaporative basin. None of the water that occasionally does rain in this part of Australia makes it to the sea, including Lake Eyre over here, which seasonally fills up and with water, but most of the time it is dry. In terms of impacts on the water cycle, the large thirsty Australian cities like Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth are trap water in dams and use various diversions to keep the water supply. Now we're moving into, particularly in Perth, which is getting drier and drier, we end up with desalinization plants. Another problem of water is the irrigation leaves behind the salts. We end up with this dryland salinity pattern across southern Western Australia and Victoria and South Australia, and so that's a big issue that we're facing as well. In terms of nutrients, we see that the Murray-Darling Basin has got particularly phosphorus problems, too much phosphorus leading to algal blooms. We also have, which also contaminates the water, we have too much phosphorus in the Swan Canning River. We have a very low background of nutrients that enters the Great Barrier Reef, so any agricultural or grazing impacts that enhance the runoff of nutrients and sediments into the Great Barrier Reef lagoon can cause large impacts. So each of the major cities have nitrogen, phosphorus problems as well, like Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne. So we're seeing all kinds of current issues, but in addition, potential diversions from the tropical rivers of the north are posed, and these diversions could be for agriculture or drinking water. They could have large ecological impacts as well. So these are the overview of this big dry continent of Australia and some of the issues associated with the water.